It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
Rico Brogna. A little pissed off, Rico Brogna. Let me just start off by saying I am not drunk. Okay, this is not a drunken edition of Rico Brogna. While I did have a few drinks on this vacation day I'm having in North Carolina, I am not drunk. So Hoff and I will present to you a drunk Rico, but it ain't going to be tonight. Tonight is about business. And the business at hand is the New York Mets just went into Anaheim. They begin this long-ass road trip, 10 games, 4 cities, 3 time zones. They start the trip off with a nice Friday night victory, which we'll get to, and they lay absolute duds in Game 2 and in Game 3. And look, here's what this comes down to before we break down these games, before we read your emails, before we get into every aspect of this 2 out of 3 loss to the Anaheim Angels, the Los Angeles Angels, whatever Artie Moreno's calling them now. This freaking team could not get a big hit. They could not hit. They could not score runs. And so, yes, Jose Quintana could have been better. Yes. Yes, Huascar Brazoban, after getting the first 2 outs on Saturday, completely blew it. There's no question. But when you look at the complete consistent inconsistencies of getting a big hit, that's how you define losing 2 out of 3 to this Angel team. And it's unacceptable. I mean, it really is. Like, take a look at the National League standings. Take a look at the fact that the Arizona Diamondbacks barely lose. The San Diego Padres barely lose. So this little hiccup the Mets have run into has now put them a game and a half out of a wild card spot. And this trip's only going to get more difficult. Look, you're not facing great teams. We get it. But look what they just did against the crappy Angels team. And this is the lesson I think we all should have learned by now if we haven't learned it. The Mets in the last 3 years, however you want to define this era, the Steve Cohen era, the Francisco Lindor era, the Brandon Nimmo era, however the hell you want to define it, they have done such a terrible job of taking care of business against teams you're supposed to be. I mean, think about it. Even the finale of this series against the Angels, like on Saturday night, we're all impressed by Ben Joyce. He's throwing 105 miles an hour. The Mets can't hit him. He gets a 4-out save. They're given a break in Sunday's game by the fact that Ron Washington doesn't even use Ben Joyce. Doesn't even go back to the guy throwing 104 miles an hour. He goes to freaking Rosny Contreras, a guy who was in the Yankee farm system, traded for Jamison Tyone. They can't even touch Rosny Contreras. But honestly, we'll go through all these situations. The absolute lack of a big hit. It's been their bugaboo in the second half of this season. In any game they've lost, whether it's the last 2 games against Atlanta, whether it's the struggles they had in Miami, where they split against the Marlins, and other series in which they didn't take advantage of facing a crappy team, it always comes down to the same thing. They are unable to get that big hit. Look at the runners in scoring position stats, really over the last week. They go 2 for 10 in the Sunday loss to the Angels. They go 1 for 7 in the Saturday loss to the Angels. And then on Friday, a game they won 5-1, let's not forget, they were 3 for 18 with runners in scoring position. Then you go back to the Minnesota series, 0 for 3 in the finale, 1 for 7 in the game they won 2-0. You go back to the last 2 games of the Atlanta series, 1 for 9 in Game 4, 0 for 5 in Game 3 of the Atlanta series. So I did some math. Since really the opener against Minnesota, where they scored those 15 runs, they are 7 for their last 42 with runners in scoring position. 7 for their last 42. In this series against the Angels, they left 27 men on base. They went 6 for 35 with runners in scoring position. So before we get to any other aspect of what went wrong in this series, they are unable to get the big hit. Here's what makes this so concerning, and it is concerning, and I said this on the last Rico, and it's the reality. This team is going to go as far as their offense takes them. There'll be a game here and there in which they pitch real well and they win a low-scoring game like they did last week against Minnesota when they won 2-0. You can even argue what they did Friday against Anaheim with Blackburn pitching well in his Mets debut in the bullpen, really Jose Budo doing a solid job. They got to score runs. And you want to blame guys? All right, let's blame guys. Pete Alonso has had a crap season hitting with runners in scoring position all year. All year. And so, yes, he hits the 2-run home run on Friday night in the third inning. Great. You know, it's one of those weird situations where it's early in the game. Would I call it a big home run? Sure, it's a 1-1 game in the third inning. He hits a 2-run bomb. It turns out to be the difference in the game. It turns out to be the game winner as early as it was. But since then, think about all the big situations he came up in which he came up small. The fifth inning on Sunday really jumps out at me because they score a run to make it 3-2. Francisco Lindor hits that RBI double, which really looked like a single, but his great hustle got him to second base, and he could see the throw was coming home, so he takes the extra base. Brandon Nimmo draws a walk. J.D. Martinez flies out to right field. Pete Alonso, first pitch. It's a lazy pop-up to right field. He grounds into the double play in the third inning. He has been really the biggest culprit all season long. And certainly when you go to Sunday's game, he was a huge culprit. Let's start with Sunday's game. Jose Quintana wasn't great. He was able to battle. He gave him 5 innings. What's crazy is that the Met bullpen, which cost him the night before, did a great job. Adam Ottavino, as much as we all kill Adam Ottavino, looked as sharp as he's ever looked. Danny Young gave you a clean inning. Phil Maton gave you a clean inning. And yet, against Griffin Canning, who came in with what, a 5.5 ERA? The Mets have a million opportunities because the Angels suck. Because the Angels made not 1, not 2, 3 defensive miscues in which the Mets are barely able to take advantage of. Take a look at the first inning. Lindor draws a leadoff walk. He steals second base. And I give Mendy this because we'll rip Mendy a little bit later on. I love the fact, first inning, you're struggling to score runs, 3-2 count on Brandon Nimmo. Of course you got to send Francisco Lindor. Force the action, which isn't always the case. It's the reason why I'm kind of complimenting him, because it's not like it's an automatic 3-2 Lindor is running every single time. But he sends him, and think about what happens. Not only does he steal second base, but the backup catcher throws the ball in the center field. And you're set up with a runner on third and less than 2 outs. And this was the sign that this Sunday game, which was such a big game. And we talk about certain games are bigger than others. The finale of this series was a huge game. What a freaking series against the Angels, and we're doing a positive Rico. Maybe it would have turned into a drunken Rico. I don't know. I felt like we couldn't have a drunken Rico. We needed to have a serious conversation over this 3-game series with the Angels. And also, I was drinking today. I could tell early on it was never going to turn into a drunken Rico. My opinion, Hoff, to lay out the Rico schedule while I'm on vacation, yet I'm still working, I would say Tuesday, West Coast game, or sort of West Coast game, late night game. That's the perfect drunken Rico after a Tuesday night game in Colorado, the opener of the series. So assuming your schedule is clear and assuming you can just pound some Maker's Marks, I would Tuesday night would be a perfect candidate for drunk Rico. Are you with me?
Evan, if you're drinking, I'm drinking.
Okay. I like it. I think the problem is it was an afternoon game on Sunday, and I was drinking, but it was like, just the kids were around. I couldn't accelerate the drinking. I think that the vacation drinking accelerates when I'm able to get my kids asleep. And that's why the Tuesday night's the perfect drunk Rico. But anyhow, I digress. Let's go back to bitching about the finale of this series. You got a runner on third, less than 2 outs. And it's tough to kill J.D. Martinez because J.D. hit the grand slam on Saturday, which we'll get into. But you have got to, even when you're lacking the big hit, which the Mets have been doing recently, can you give me and us the contact that provides a run, the fly ball to deep left field? And instead, we got J.D. Martinez looking at a freaking pitch right down the middle for strike 3. Now, look, Pete Alonso has a chance to clean the mess up. 2 outs, runner on third. He can still get a big base hit, like the Angels have been able to mix it throughout this series. And instead, he grounds out to third base. So I do pick on Pete. He was the first guy I mentioned. But if you're J.D. Martinez and you come up with a runner on third and less than 2 outs, can you get the freaking run home? Now, we get to the second inning. I give Harrison Bader credit because Harrison Bader, despite, average numbers, I'd say okay numbers, maybe a little bit better than we had expected. Obviously, the reverse splits are weird. He's done a better job against righties than lefties. Bader comes through, taking advantage of the Angels' shoddy defense in the second inning when Alvarez hits the ground ball to shortstop, and it turns into a little bit of a miscue, as they say, and he gets on first base, and McNeil draws a walk. McNeil continues, by the way, to have very good at-bats. He's had some very good quality at-bats, drawing walks, starting rallies, continuing to hit. So we could put McNeil to the side as not the main culprit here. But Bader comes through, taking advantage of the error with the RBI single that gave him the early lead, and then Lindor strikes out. And look, Lindor hasn't been awful, but I'm just pointing out all the freaking opportunities the Mets had in this game. Second inning, you got a chance to bury Griffin Canning. You got a chance to make the Angels really pay. You only score one run. Third inning, Alonso comes up. Runner on first, one out, bounces into a double play. And I don't want to forget the fact that Jose Quintana had a chance for a bounce-back inning, or I should say a shutdown inning, after being given an early lead, and he promptly gives it up. I mean, Joe Adell hit that double off the wall. I thought off the bat it was going to be a two-run home run. Didn't matter because both runs scored. Sacrifice fly, something the Mets can't do. Wild pitch, the whole thing. So Quintana was very, very shaky in this game. No question about it. But think about the Angels. The crappy Anaheim Angels of Los Angeles. I know I got it backwards. Actually, I think they dropped the Anaheim part. They're just the Los Angeles Angels. In the second inning and in the third inning, they get a sacrifice fly to drive a run in. And I bring that up because that's what the Mets have been missing. It's not just the big hit, it's the productive out, which they failed at. So they put themselves in a 3-1 hole. But you take a deep breath and you say to yourself, well, you're facing Griffin Canning. You're facing the Anaheim Angels. This shouldn't be a problem. If Quintana can settle down and keep them in the game, which he was able to do, this shouldn't be a problem. Fifth inning. That was the other killer part of this game. Fifth inning, you get the leadoff double by Jeff McNeil. I was a little pissed that Harrison Bader striking out looking, can't advance the runner. Lindor comes through with that RBI single that really turned into a double. Nimmo walks, 2 on, 1 out, down by a run. Griffin Canning is on his last leg. His pitch count is over 90, and J.D. Martinez and Pete Alonso both fail with those fly balls to right field. Sixth inning, and that was another one that killed me. 2 outs and nobody on, innings going nowhere. Alvarez hits that ground ball to shortstop, pretty much an infield hit. Zach Neto makes the great play. Awful throw. Alvarez is on second base. You got a runner on second, 2 outs. The Angels have just made their third error of the game. Big moment to come through. And Jeff McNeil, who I know I cut him some slack because he has been productive lately, does April Jeff McNeil by popping it up to left field. Killer. But the real one was the 8th inning. The 8th inning was the ultimate kick in the balls moment in terms of failing with runners in scoring position. Alonso gets hit by a pitch. Jesse Winker, behind in the count, rips a ball to right field. Pete goes first to third. You're set up with first and third and 1 out for Mark Vientos. And look, again, there are certain guys it's tough to kill. Vientos has had his moments. He had that big double on Saturday, which we'll get to, another failed opportunity. Hit the ball to the outfield. But more than that, if you're going to send up a pinch runner, which Mendy did, he takes Winker out to go to Tyrone Taylor, and you've got multiple pickoff attempts in which you've got the Angel pitcher, who was it? Let me check it out. Mike Baumann, using his, what do they call those things again? I forget what they call them. When you pick off or you step on, whatever. Using your disengagements. There you go. I got it. Popped it in my head. I have drank a little bit today. I'm so drunk in Rico, but you know what I drink, by the way? I digress. I'll enter wine with some vacation points. I like beer. I've had some beers today. But what my wife realizes I love is she takes ices, Luigi's ices, the thing that Craig used to fight with me about and say that it's terrible. She will take the Luigi's ices. She will put it in a cup and mix it with vodka. And I got to tell you, that's my favorite drink. It's absolutely my favorite drink. That's the best way to have a frozen drink. Don't judge me, Hoff. Don't judge me.
I know you love your Luigi ices, but really?
Yeah,
It's like a frozen daiquiri, right?
1,000%. Yes, it's like a frozen drink. Which by the way, what's wrong with that? I'm on the beach.
No,
You know
there's
what I
nothing
mean?
wrong with that.
And I love that's my go-to. In fact, when we do the Tuesday night drunken Rico, here's what I'm gonna be drinking. I'm gonna be drinking my Luigi's Ices with vodka, and then from our trip to Mexico, mezcal. All right, some shots of mezcal. And if you don't know what that is, Google MESCAL.
You're doing shots. You're doing shots. We're gonna have Evan doing shots.
Yeah. To really give the true essence of a drunken Rico, I need to do shots. Yeah. Tuesday's gonna be fire. The Mets better win some freaking games, though. I'll tell you that right now. If we're doing a drunken Rico on a 4-game losing streak, actually maybe it'll be better. I have no idea. But if you're Mendoza and you're sending Tyrone Taylor to pinch run, which I think we all agree with, Jesse Winker is not exactly Ricky Henderson, even though he'll sneak a stolen base here and there. And you've got Mike Baumann giving you multiple disengagements. Run. Take advantage of it. Mark Vientos has had a very good year. He hits the ball hard. He hits the ball hard on the ground. You see what can happen. And Vientos hits that ground ball to shortstop, and it was such a sickening feeling as the ball left his bat because we all knew the result. But send the runner. Be aggressive. Because I look at it this way. And you could even argue, and I'm not actually going to argue this, but you could even argue if you wanted, send the runner so you could even in the worst case scenario try to steal a run. Now, it's not the easiest thing to do because Pete's the runner on third base. But my point is there's a lot of positive that can come out of Tyrone Taylor running. Like, you're not taking the bat out of Mark Vientos' hands. There aren't 2 outs. So even in the worst case scenario where he's thrown out, he still has an opportunity to drive in the tying run. So it felt like a missed opportunity when you send up a pinch runner like that. With that said, if you're Mark Vientos, come through. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. Don't hit a ground ball right at the shortstop and bounce into a double play. And look, even after that happens, and even after Phil Maton gets to the 9th inning, or the 8th inning, it's the bottom of the 9th inning. They are sending in a reliever who is not their closer, and Rosny Contreras. I know it's the bottom of the order, but your bottom of the order is Francisco Alvarez, Jeff McNeil, Harrison Bader. It's not exactly the worst thing in the world. Can they give us a little bit of a rally? We get nothing out of that. Francisco Alvarez is a mess right now. He did have that infield single, but for the most part, he's not hitting. What are you going to do? I mean, you should still send him out there every day. We did see Turin start the Saturday game, but Alvarez is slumping. Obviously, McNeil couldn't get the inning going as he has numerous times. Bader strikes out, which was a disappointment because all you needed was one base run to at least give you that chance of some Lindor magic. But this was an important one. This was a swing game. A swing game in that you win the series, you could eliminate the bad taste in your mouth from Saturday, and it was the same crap. Good job by the Met bullpen. I know we're not really going to say much of that, but it's true. The Met bullpen kept them in the game. And terrible job by this offense, which did nothing. And then you go to Saturday's game. Saturday was the other tough one. I was thinking of calling Pete and saying, should we do a late night West Coast pissed off Rico Brogna? Because that game on Saturday is on the list. It's actually maybe the first game of the second half of the season that enters the list of horrible losses. If you recall, we made that list in the first half of the year of best wins and worst losses, did a whole podcast if you missed it during the All-Star break. Most of the Met losses here in the second half, the 2 to Miami, the 2 to Atlanta, the finale against Minnesota, obviously what happened against the Angels. Actually, no, not the Angels. Everything before that, they weren't like ball-breaking losses. They sucked. They weren't fun, but they hadn't had that brutal loss. Saturday was a brutal loss. Everything about Saturday was a loss. Like, the elements of a brutal loss is when you get a little bit of the tease. And when J.D. Martinez comes up in that spot and hits a grand slam home run and gives this team a dramatic 4-2 lead And I admit this, after trailing 2-0, after having all the missed opportunities that they had in that game, when JD hit the grand slam, even though they needed 9 outs, I had a weird optimism that they were going to win that game, that they were not going to blow it, especially the way they did. Because think about the first 6 innings, really the first 6+ innings of that game on Saturday. You have Kevin Pillar making one of the great catches you'll ever see, robbing Lindor of an extra base hit. You have a great opportunity in the first inning. It ends with Jesse Winker striking out. You have a great opportunity in the third inning after the double and the catcher's interference. Pete Alonso strikes out. You get the leadoff man on in the 5th inning, and Jeff McNeil tries to stretch a single into a double. He gets thrown out. You still get an opportunity for Brandon Nimmo. He grounds out. You get a couple of guys on base in the 6th inning. Luis Torrens grounds out. Like, it was constant how many opportunities they had against Jose Soriano, of all people, that they kept failing on. And finally, in the 7th inning, you put together the rally. Brandon Nimmo draws a great walk to load the bases for J.D. Martinez, and he hits the grand slam home run. And I think collectively, anyone who's staying up to watch that game, it is a Saturday night, so it's a little bit easier. I mean, there is that pump your fist, yell at the TV, feel good, tweet something confidently moment. And I give JD credit. He hit the grand slam against Atlanta in that 7-run inning on that Friday night game, the firework night game. And he comes through again with a huge grand slam, a grand slam that actually in my brain made me think, not only are the Mets going to win this game, but maybe this relaxes the team and breaks them out of this slump that they've been in terms of hitting in a big spot. And then you get Huascar Braziban. And look, these moves that David Stearns made, I said it at the time, I like them. They have low risk in terms of what you gave up, but relievers are up and down, and you don't know what you're going to get. I consider them lottery tickets. Now, Huascar Braziban has had a nice year with the Miami Marlins and comes in with a 2-run lead the 7th inning and strikes the first 2 guys out. Like, again, the bones of a brutal loss. Dramatic grand slam. Braziban gets the first 2 guys out, gives up an innocent base hit with 2 outs and nobody out. Innocent. I'm not panicking. I'm like, all right, it's not going to be a 1-2-3 inning. Gives up a base hit to Stefanik. No harm, no foul. The killer was the walk to Schwindel. That was the killer. And at that point, I can't scream and yell and say Mendy needed to make a pitching change, but I would have somebody warming up that isn't a lefty, especially with Zach Neto, who's been crushing lefties coming up. I'd have somebody warming up. And for the life of me, I thought he did. I thought Ryan Stanek was warming up in the bullpen. He never went to him because he let Braziban stay in the game to face Neto. Now, I don't think keeping Braziban in to face Neto is malpractice. I don't think it's a brain-dead move, but it did make me pause. Because once you let the 9th place hitter get on with a base hit, and then once you walk the next hitter to put the tying run on base and bring the lead run to the plate, the antennas go up. The antennas go up that, well, maybe Braziban doesn't have it despite those 2 strikeouts he got to start the inning. But he leaves him in, 3-2 pitch, freaking killer. Neto hits the 3-run home run. Angel Stadium is rocking, and all of a sudden a 2-run lead becomes a 1-run deficit. But that's not it. Like, all of that stuff, the bones of a brutal loss. But what makes things worse is that Mark Vientos at-bat in the top of the 8th inning. You're facing Matt Moore, who's had a crappy season. I think he's one of those guys I wanted in free agency. And who knows, he may have had a better year than Jake Diekman. And I think he has had a better year than Jake Diekman, who's now gone. But Vientos gives you that great at-bat. Tremendous at-bat. 11-pitch battle before he rips a double into the left field corner. This is the epitome of the Mets' inability to get the big hit or make the proper contact. Tie the game up. Like, the best thing you can do after a back-breaking moment like that where Braziban gives up a 3-run home run, and you just erase that grand slam that was hit. Immediately tie the game. Immediately. And with a runner on second and nobody out, and Luis Torrens coming up, you have that opportunity. I thought about pinch hitting Torrens. Torrens has had a good year. So it isn't easy to simply pinch hit for him. He came into the game hitting over 300 despite taking an 0 for 4, which I think has brought his average under 300. So I was iffy on it. But Luis Torrens hit the ball to second base. Hits the ball to shortstop. We all know what that means. Jose Iglesias, pinch runner, can't advance. Jeff McNeil, who's had some good at-bats. Remember, the inning before, and this is why I hesitate to kill him as much as maybe some Met fans want to rip him for some of these bad at-bats with runners in scoring position. He's contributed to the rare times the Mets have scored, including drawing the leadoff walk in the inning in which JD hit the grand slam. McNeil hits the ground ball to second base. One batter too late. And then Tyrone Taylor grounds out. We saw Ron Washington aggressively go to Ben Joyce. I was surprised Tyrone Taylor even made contact. But when you have a runner on second and nobody out, in the inning following where you gave up the lead, you got to score that run. And you could pick a lot of innings from Saturday and Sunday to kind of really show you how frustrating this has been and how bad this has been. Maybe that's the inning. Maybe the 8th inning, down by a run after this splendid Mark Vientos at-bat. Maybe that's the best example of the Mets just continuing to not just struggle with runners in scoring position, because you don't even need a hit there with runners in scoring position to tie the game. Just their overall ineptitude at giving you those quality at-bats to tack on a run or get a run without even getting a big hit. And what makes this more painful than any other year, quite frankly, is that this is their strength. This Met team is hopeless in making the playoffs if they don't hit. That has been the story since opening day. That's been the story since February when I tried to say, hey, I think the Mets could be good. Yeah, I thought they could be good, and I guess they have been based on their record, because they're going to score runs. And I can do it with great starting pitching. They're not. They don't have great starting pitching. And quite frankly, what Quintana did on Sunday and what David Peterson did on Saturday is good enough to win games. But they didn't score runs. As far as Pete Alonso is concerned, I know that there are still calls to, well, don't hit him clean up. Drop him in the batting order. I don't think that's the answer. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why I don't think that's the answer. Why is Pete having a disappointing year? Ask yourself that. Why is it? Do we think it's the contract? Do we think he's pressing? So if that's the case, for a guy who's always been a cleanup hitter, who's always batted third, who's always been in the middle of the order, do we think he responds well to being dropped in the order? And that's not babying him. That's more asking a question like, your job as manager is to get the best out of your players. That's your job. So do we honestly think dropping Pete Alonso to wherever is going to get the best out of him? I don't. Personally, I don't. Now, who would you move up in the order? I think clearly the answer is Mark Vientos. He's the guy, despite some of our rips of him, specifically the double play on Sunday. But I would not make that lineup change. Unfortunately, the real answer is these guys just have to be better. And I know that's not a sexy answer, but that's the absolute truth. One other move I'd like to question Carlos Mendoza on is pulling David Peterson when he did. David Peterson pitched very well in this game. His pitch count was low. He was coming off a 1-2-3 6th inning. Why are we rushing to take him out? There weren't signs that he was breaking down. And honestly, let him start the 7th inning. He puts a guy on base. You can always make that move to Huascar Braziban. But Mendy didn't do that. He trusted his bullpen. His bullpen blew it. But me, I'm more angry at the fact there was one freaking inning in which they scored runs. That Kevin Pillar catch just gave me bad vibes from the beginning too. Like that was such an unbelievable defensive play by Kevin Pillar. Supermaning himself through the air and taking an extra base hit away from Francisco Lindor. As far as Friday's game is concerned, it's funny. Blackburn pitched well. Budo pitched well. I don't love the way they use the Jose Budo weapon. I would pick my spots a little bit better if I'm Carlos Mendoza. But Blackburn did a great job of navigating trouble. The Angels had so many opportunities against Blackburn in this game. He got some big double plays, made some big pitches when he needed to. Pete Alonso hit the home run in the third inning. But even in that game on Friday, a game they won 5-1, a game where Blackburn pitches well, bullpen does a good job, big home run early, 3 for 18 with runners in scoring position. So many missed opportunities to make that an even uglier score. Now, look, they won 5-1. I'm not complaining necessarily about that, but it's just a reminder that the issues are there, even in victories. But great job by Blackburn. Pitched a hell of a game, and we'll see what he does in his next start against the Colorado Rockies. They have to hit. That's the moral of this story right now. They have got to hit. 27 guys left on base in this 3-game series against the Angels. Unacceptable. Now, let me get to your emails. We got a lot of them. ricob@gmail.com. A lot of them may be similar. A lot of them may be complaints. Well, let's hear from them. Why don't we? Let's hear from the people. Let's go to Javon Graham. Javon Graham writes, I fear the June swoon has just been delayed 2 months. With all that travel to the West Coast and easy teams like Oakland and Miami at home, I fear this is where the season is lost. They already got off on the wrong foot, losing a series to the Angels. Can't even complain about the starting pitching in this series. It's the offense becoming very inconsistent. What's happened to the hitting? Since July 14th, this team is hitting 186 with runners in scoring position. Only the White Sox are worse. They have become way too reliant on the home run. Friday night, I don't like Mendy burning Budo and Maton in a 4-run game. Thought that was the perfect spot to ease Brazoban instead into a 2-run game the following night. Is Brazoban already ahead of Budo and Maton in pecking order? That doesn't make sense. He wrote a lot more, but let me address that first part. I don't think there's any question that this August is a concern, a top concern that we could be looking at a swoon, that we could be looking at the month that defines this Mets season. That's not me saying it's definitely going to happen. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? It's freaking baseball. But the warning signs are there. 20 of 29 games on the road. And you can tell me all day how well the Mets have played on the road this season. That's a lot of road games. That's a lot of road games in a small amount of time in a lot of geographic locations. You mentioned the bad teams they're playing. Yeah, they haven't done well against bad teams. They didn't do well against bad teams in 2022 when they had the soft schedule that was supposed to be the easy part of their schedule to lead them to the National League East. So this is a warning. And the Mets know this in this locker room. They better know this. Their season's on the line. No doubt. There's a chance that September may be meaningless if they don't pick it up. This West Coast trip is monstrous. That's why what I laid out a few days ago, and I stand by it even though I'm behind now, is 6-4. That's the goal. 6 and let's not get nuts. 8-2, 9-1. Give me a freaking break. That was never going to happen. The way I laid out this road trip was 2 out of 3 in Anaheim, which they've already failed on. Win the game in St. Louis. More on that in a few minutes. 2 out of 3 in Colorado. And I'll give you losing 2 out of 3 in Seattle. You're already behind on that. And what's also frustrating, the Diamondbacks aren't cooling off. I mean, Diamondbacks are losing 4-0 to the Pirates. Like, no big deal. They come back, they win 5-4. And now that hole in the National League wildcard race is a game and a half. It's not that it's insurmountable. No one's saying it is. But that number can grow if they don't pick it up on this West Coast trip. So I totally get the concern. Ralph writes, early on in this big Mets turnaround, you voiced concern when you heard that it was based on a new attitude, that we have nothing to lose, let's play carefree. Nobody expects anything from us. So now that they've gotten themselves in the thick of the race, there are expectations now. And with that comes pressure, as we've seen them lately struggle mightily hitting with runners in scoring position. So you were wondering how we were going to handle things when the games got bigger and bigger. Not good so far. Yeah, I don't know when the moment of pressure begins, because you could argue that pressure may have started 3 weeks ago. Those expectations changed a while ago. And there have been some moments where they have responded. I mean, look, they lose those last 2 games against the Braves. There's certainly a fear that that was going to kind of turn their season in the wrong direction. They won 2 out of 3 against the Twins. Like, they won the first 2 games against a team that's a playoff team in the American League. They fared very well against the Yankees. As down as the Yankees were, those are still high-pressurized games with sold-out crowds, whether it's in Queens and the Bronx. So I think right now they're not playing well, at least these last 2 games against Anaheim, and certainly overall with their struggles and runners in scoring position. But when does that line of demarcation start on, okay, this is when the games matter? Negative Dan, who has shared a lot of these concerns, rightfully so. 6 for 35 with runners in scoring position, 27 runners left on base, and losing a series to a team that entered playing us 15 games under 500. I need to hear the positive Tommy and I'm a mush off spins on how this team is a legitimate playoff contender. I can predict positive Tommy's tweet now. Everybody loses a series. There's a long way to go. Stay positive. The team fights. They're going places. Cancel your Cancun vacations. As Hoff is scoreboard watching and not acknowledging how flawed his own team is. Thank God Roman Reigns is back. Negative 10. By the way, the Roman return, very obvious, but awesome. Great to see him back. They tried to make Roman Reigns a good guy for a billion years, and it finally happened. Vince McMahon's like 10 feet underground, but guess what? You got Roman over. Good job. Don't worry about the spin of positive Tommy or Hoff. What do you call you? I'm a mush Hoff? Are you a mush, Pete? Is that what Negative Dan is accusing you of being?
Well, I will say that I put out a very positive tweet about Brazaban, about how he may be the best trade piece at the deadline. And then that was after the first 2 strikeouts on Saturday. And then the rest.
Yeah,
happened.
you know, Hoff, here's the thing. I'm not blaming you, okay? Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, is very, very dangerous in terms of revealing your emotions before a game is over. Like, look, we all do it. JD hits the grand slam, and I think all of us are like, yeah, JD. And then you almost feel responsible 15 minutes later when Huascar Brazaban gives the game up. So one thing I've learned is maybe we should wait till the games are over, and then you tweet about how you feel about the team, because the crazy emotions, and you hit on it. Brazaban strikes out the first 2 guys. I thought he was dominating too. I figured, oh, great. This part's easy. And then out of nowhere, the hit, the walk, the 3-run home run. So I exonerate you from mushing Huascar Brazaban. You're like all of us. You actually thought he wasn't going to implode after he got the first 2 outs.
No, and I've been excited about him. Like, when I look at his numbers and look what he did in Miami, I'm like, I know he wasn't in many high leverage situations, which is a big issue. And I really don't even know if it was a high leverage situation he was in on Saturday. It was a fresh inning. There was no one on base. It's the 7th inning. He struck out the first 2 guys. What's high leverage about that? But regardless, he ended up crapping a bed.
Yeah, no, he did. And Ryan Stanek got off to a bad start here. He's looked better since. Huascar Brazaban had his awful moment. It doesn't mean that his entire tenure is going to be a failure, because, look, he's going to get other opportunities. He's going to get other opportunities on this road trip. And hopefully he comes up big. I would like to see Mendoza be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Not stupid with Jose Budo. Like, I get Jose Budo is a weapon and he can give you multiple innings. I felt like Friday was a missed opportunity. Or Friday was a misused opportunity by using Budo the way he did. Because if you don't use him for multiple innings, maybe he's pitching the 7th inning on Saturday night against Anaheim. Ethan writes, Pete Alonso needs to bleep and go. He sucks in every big moment and only hits when the games do not matter. He does not deserve to be an all-star this year, and he is so selfish and only cares about the home run derby. He needs to be DFA'd. Okay, I got to stop reading this. At first, I thought it was serious. And then it got, he needs to be DFA'd. Yeah, he sucks. He needs to be DFA'd. All right. Thank you, Ethan, for your words. Pete Alonso has not had a great year. He's hitting 198 with runners in scoring position. I don't think I would DFA him. Fred writes, I don't care how grueling this road trip was supposed to be. If you can't beat the Angels, you might as well pack it up and go home. More of the same garbage at bats, terrible numbers with runners in scoring position, and absolutely no life at all from this offense, really, since the All-Star break. Yeah, what I've noticed since the All-Star break with this team, and I'm trying to think what their record is. I guess I could do the math right in front of you. 2-2 against Miami, 2-0 against the Yankees, 2-2 against the Braves. So we're 6-4. 2-1 against the Twins. That gets you to 8-5. And then losing 2 out of 3 here. So that's 9-7 in the 16 games since the break, which is average, I guess we would say. They have big innings, big moments. 7 runs against Atlanta, right? The 15-run game against Minnesota. The grand slam by J.D. Martinez. And they have so many lifeless innings and so many innings where they miss out on opportunities. So the numbers can be a little bit deceiving with the amount of runs that they're scoring, but it seems like they come in bunches. And we've seen a lot of kind of empty opportunities from this team since the All-Star break at 9-7. And it's got to change. They've got a West Coast trip, not just this one, but they got another one going into Labor Day weekend. They go to San Diego, and they two teams that I hate to say this, and this will sound negative, but at this point, I just want to be within striking distance of them when the Mets get to those games in 3.5 weeks. Because I think what's concerning about a road trip like this, especially with Arizona and San Diego almost winning every single day, is that we're going to look up and be 5 games out. We're going to look up and be 4.5 games out. Right now, it's a game and a half. It's not the end of the world. You go win tomorrow night against St. Louis. Arizona loses, and they've got a tough series. They're taking on Cleveland this week, thank God. Hopefully we'll get some help from the Guardians. So you can immediately get back into a wild card spot, or at least right there. I get that. But that's the fear. And it would feel helpless to go into that monster week in Arizona and in San Diego and have this team be buried. Let's go to Brian Smith. Brian writes, while both Francisco Lindor and to a lesser extent Pete Alonso have put up numbers this year, they have significantly underperformed in crucial game-changing situations relative to the rest of the league. According to Baseball Reference, Lindor and Alonso are among the bottom 10 OPS in MLB with 2 outs and runners in scoring position. Francisco Lindor, 663, 8th worst. Pete Alonso, 664, 9th worst. They're also in the bottom 20 OPS and MLB in late and close situations. Pete Alonso is 2nd worst at a 594 OPS. Francisco Lindor, 630. Too many times Pete has flailed at the low and away slaughter while Lindor rolls one over and pops one to end a threat. If the Mets miss the playoffs, most would agree it will be largely due to their leaky bullpen and below-average pitching staff. However, 2 all-star caliber players that the Mets depend on, posting league-worst numbers in game-altering moments, will deservedly draw criticism as well. So, numbers are numbers. And great job by Brian supplying those numbers. The Alonso stuff, not surprising. We've talked about it a lot. He's having a down season, especially in big moments. The Lindor numbers, and I knew them, so I can't say I'm surprised, but they don't feel like the reality. Is that a fair statement to say? Like, watching Lindor all season long, it doesn't feel like he should have some of the worst late and close stats in Major League Baseball. It doesn't feel that way. The Alonso numbers back up a reality that we've watched. It doesn't necessarily feel that way with Francisco Lindor. But here's the point, and it really continues Monday late afternoon in St. Louis, certainly in Colorado and beyond. They need their best players to come up big. No question about it. Their best players need to perform at a high level. And what we saw in this series against Anaheim and what we saw in those last 2 games against Atlanta is a collective fail. Now, this schedule gets very, very tricky from a travel standpoint. They're on their way to St. Louis. They're going to play 1 game against the St. Louis Cardinals, a team that, believe it or not, is only a game and a half behind the Mets. You know, you sort of forget about St. Louis since they've fallen out of the wild card lead, but they're right there. So it's not only catching Arizona, San Diego, or Atlanta. Braves lost to the Marlins again, which is nice to see. But you got to hold off St. Louis. So this game on Monday, it's a 5:05 first pitch. is monstrous. It's beyond monstrous. One game against the Cardinals, the difference between a half-game lead over St. Louis or ballooning it up to 2.5. I talk a lot about tiebreakers. If the Mets win this game, they own the tiebreaker against the Cardinals. Period. Stop. If the Cardinals win this game, they split the season series. I'd have to look at what the next tiebreaker is. I don't even know what it is, to be honest with you. For some reason, I think it's divisional record, which doesn't make a lot of sense since they're not in the same division, but we'll double-check that. You know what? We'll double-check on that if the Mets lose to the Cardinals. If they beat the Cardinals, there's no point of worrying about it. But Sean Manaea is going to make that start. Manaea has been so good. But more than Sean Manaea hopefully giving another good start, how about they beat up Andre Palant? How about that? So 5:05 for this singular game in St. Louis before they go to Colorado. Luis Severino, huge start on Tuesday night. He's coming off a game in which his velocity was down. His ERA is almost at 4 after that terrible start against Minnesota. Has to go to Coors Field in Colorado. We'll see Blackburn make his second start Wednesday night in Colorado. And then David Peterson on Thursday afternoon to wrap up the series in Colorado before they've got a tough weekend in Seattle against the Seattle Mariners. One piece of news that's positive, Brandon Sproat, who is the best pitching prospect in the Met farm system. He was drafted a year ago. Started this season off in single A. Went to double A dominated. He has just been called up to triple A. So, not only is Brandon Sprout making this complete fast track to the major leagues, where we have to start thinking about him as a major factor in the 2025 rotation, you start to wonder what's his role this season. I mentioned if they weren't able to make a trade, they brought in Blackburn, he's pitched well, that I would just call him up right now, see if he can make the jump from double A, see if he can Paul Skeens the situation. I think right now with the Mets starting pitching, at least for the time being okay, give him a couple of starts in triple A, and then you start to move the wheels a little bit and say, can he help this major league team? Can he help this major league team without it feeling like you've rushed him? But keep an eye on Brandon Sproat, just got called up to triple A. He is an incredible fast riser. And if anything, even if he doesn't help this team this year, certainly got to keep an eye on for 2025. So, Met fans, how are we feeling? Pete, how are you feeling? Do you feel good that they're going to be able to snap out of this thing going to St. Louis, or the antenna's up that maybe we should be concerned?
There's a bit of concern. I don't want to be negative Nancy over here, but JD Martinez tying that game on or taking the lead on Saturday, my optimism was like, poof, here we go. We'll sweep the series. It'll be fine. And then how many games are we? Maybe we'll get 8 wins. Maybe we'll get 9 wins in this road trip. So I am a little nervous right now because, like you said, they're not getting the big hits, and that's tough. If you're not getting great pitching, you're getting good pitching, but no hitting attached to it, can't win.
I really believe that. I don't want to over-exaggerate the importance of a singular game, but I think tomorrow or Monday, depending on when you're listening, Monday's game against the Cardinals is enormous. It's a huge swing game in this series, in this road trip. I think they win this game. You get the 2-2. You got a crappy Colorado Rocky team, even though you got to travel back out west. I think there's a sigh of relief. You beat a good team. You beat a team close to you. You win in a very tricky situation and having to travel. And I would feel very good at 2-2 going into the rest of this trip. I think if they lose this game to St. Louis, there's going to be complete panic, at least from the fan base. I'm not saying the locker room's going to panic. I know we will. So I think that Monday's game against the Cardinals is an incredibly important game. And this team needs to prove that they can respond to this adversity. They've had a little bit of adversity since they got hot, a little bit. They responded to struggling in Miami. They responded to that. They responded to losing 2 out of 3 to the Astros after the OMG concert. I thought they responded to that. They responded to losing to those last 2 games to Atlanta, where our buddy Sal tried to mush the Mets with his tweet. I'm just kidding, Sal. They responded with 2 wins against Minnesota. This is another moment, another big moment for this core, for this group of guys. They got to respond. This was a bad series loss to the Angels. There's no spinning that. It's bad. It's a long season, though. It's a long road trip, though. They have to respond. Monday's game against the St. Louis Cardinals, and we're going to do a Rico after it. Don't worry. We'll be here, win, lose, or draw. Not sure what time it'll be, but it will be sometime on Monday. And they better freaking win. That's how I'll phrase it. To quote the great Joe Beningo, they better freaking win. I'll leave it at that.
Well, listen, and that's what was so frustrating about Saturday's loss and Sunday's loss too. But the teams that needed to lose on Saturday lost. Like the Braves lost, the Phillies lost, the Mets, they needed to win that game, and then they go ahead, they lose Saturday, and then they go ahead and lose today, and Phillies win, and it's just like you need to make up ground, man.
The Philly thing, look, it's great watching the Phillies lose. They finally won on Sunday. The Saturday loss was brutal for them. They had a big lead. It's not that I'm not paying attention to the Phillies losing. I can't take the division seriously. Not with their inconsistencies of our own team. Like, I just can't comprehend, the NL East, and it's back up to 8 games after losing ground until I see this team win a little bit more consistently out of the break. So, yeah, the Phillies have struggled, and they've made it sort of realistic, but I can't buy it until I see this team win more consistently, and they're going to get a chance. Monday night against the St. Louis Cardinals, huge, huge night. We appreciate all the emails. Sorry I didn't get to all of them. There's a lot of angry people. There was a lot of people repeating the same thing. They can't hit. This guy sucks. Screw him. So we did the best we can. But you can always email us to ricob@gmail.com. Also leave us a voicemail, 725-222-8699. So here's your Rico schedule. Monday they take on the Cardinals. We will have a Rico Brogna at some point on Monday night. We are scheduling a Drunken Rico for Tuesday. So after game 1 against the Colorado Rockies Tuesday night, the plan is there'll be a lot of mezcal. So stay tuned for a Drunken Rico sometime around, midnight on Tuesday night. We'll give you a Rico after the series ends against Colorado on Thursday. So very busy Rico. Hopefully the audio quality is good. I'm sitting on a deck a few feet away from a beach. That's my vacation, baby. Hope you're all having a good time. I'll be back on the radio next Monday, but we'll be Ricoing all week long. Thank you very much for downloading, subscribing, and consuming another edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.